Okay, let's peel back the layers of the biblical myth and let's look at how these contradictory texts claim to give divine orders to David, right? We're going to examine two biblical accounts that detail the census that David was supposed to take and the travesty that occurred because of it, right? So King David is presented with a situation that is interesting, right? In 2 Samuel, it claims that God directed David to count his people. And so he figures that he's going to follow divine orders, right? But now this mandate is portrayed as coming from God, right? And so, of course, if somebody is getting a direction from the Most High, they're going to follow it, right? Now, First Chronicles says that the order was given by Satan. Now, that's two different entities, deities. So what's really going on now? How can someone even reconcile these two accounts, right? Who gave the order? Was it God or was it Satan? Or are both one and the same? So in the text, David does the census and God decides to punish him. Why did he get punished for doing what God told him to do? That doesn't make any sense to me, right? So then David goes out and tells Joab, do the census. And Joab questions him, asking why, but ultimately does it, right? He does what he's told. The king asked him to do it. He did it. Now, according to the text, because of the census, God gets angry with David and Israel, the people who didn't even do anything but just say, I'm alive in your kingdom. That's crazy. Then God says, because you did the census, the people have to suffer. You can choose famine, exile, or plague, which is like, what? So the famine would mean prolonged suffering. That would take a heavy psychological, emotional toll. So David skips this. And then in reference to exile is something that they're used to. I mean, they just literally began to form this kingdom with David being the second king. So this already was a bit too much. It was something. So David decides on the plague, which ultimately means mass death. But still, why is God doing this? It's never really described. It's just like God woke up angry one day, right? So this plague claims 70,000 lives and the people just pass away. And David was like, why kill the people for what I did? Like, they didn't do anything. Take it out on me and my family. He doesn't get a response. Now, it's said that Gad informs him to make an altar for sacrifice and the Lord will be pleased. All of this death occurred because David was trying to follow God's command and make it stop and appease God. He's told to take an animal's life, and that's what's going to make God happy, right? So in one text, God gives the order. In another, it's Satan. Which one is it? Clearly two different deities. Now, this is just one biblical contradiction amongst the many. Now, this is a clear contradiction. Was it God or was it the devil that gave the order? And why all this death? Like, it doesn't really make any sense. Seriously. So this is the genealogical mystery of Jesus, a story woven from royal descent and a lot of discrepancy, right? Both Matthew and Luke trace Jesus' lineage to King David, right? Affirming his messianic credentials through a heritage of royalty. Matthew's account begins with Abraham and then puts together a lineage that culminates in Jesus, like a structured symbolic narrative, right? Now, Luke's narrative is a parallel account that goes from Adam to Jesus, and then it's more comprehensive with his ancestry, right? Both accounts converge on King David, the pivotal figure whose lineage fulfills all prophecies of the Messiah, right? And so with Matthew records 25 generations from Joseph back to David, creating a ordered framework, so to speak. And then Luke has 40 generations between Joseph and David, presenting a numerically distinct account. Matthew wants a structure of 42 generations, though the count really falls short, right? The numerical inconsistency, right, from 41 to 42, challenges the symbolism, prompting, questions about the structure, really, right? And then names diverge between the accounts, with some omitted, some are rearranged. And this really kind of makes you question what's really going on here with these records, right? And these omissions, so to speak, they talk about an attempt to imbue the genealogy with a deeper meaning. But a side-by-side comparison reveals big differences in the structure, in the generation count, and the names recorded. Some scholars suggest that one genealogy represents Mary's line while the other Joseph's, right? But both accounts state and trace Joseph's lineage, complicating attempts to resolve the discrepancies through a maternal-parental division, so to speak. Now, genealogies in ancient times served both theological and political purposes. Then it reflected the cultural values of the communities that they were coming from and that they represented, right? And these genealogies reinforced messianic prophecies, right? Establishing a divine connection through a royal lineage. That's the Christian belief, so to speak. Now, scholars continue to debate these discrepancies and then examines the detail and the layers of meaning inside these records. So artists and theologians, they think about these genealogies and they try to bridge the historical context with contemporary understandings, right? However, these discrepancies, they talk about, how the complexity of the Bible, and that it's not necessarily a narrative from God, but from men in general. This spicy gospel mystery is where we have spices shape the gospel narrative and provide a space for contradictory statements, right? In examining these biblical contradictions, we come up with different spice deliveries, and the difference in timing, and then another eyewitness account, right? In the book of John, right here, we are told that Nicodemus arrived with 75 pounds of spice for Jesus' burial. Now that's a lot of spice, but we were told he came with that amount in order to show his wealth. Now, Mark describes 3 devoted women arriving at dawn, taking spices for the occasion of this little spicy anointing, right? And in Luke's narrative, the women not only prepare the body, but also serve as eyewitnesses to the burial. So right here, there's a timing discrepancy, which suggests that the women may have unknowingly repeated their ritual, unaware of Nicodemus's prior act. Scholars debate these accounts, questioning which details truly convey the real message of the tradition. One historian, has suggested that the women were unaware of Nicodemus's earlier contributions, therefore offering a possible reconciliation. So what you got to do is you imagine history as like a stew, and then each gospel is like adding its old elements to the complex layering, right? Otherwise known as contradictions, right? And everybody can see that these texts all have at the very least, confusing details, if not outright contradictory stories, right? The stories show that the Gospels are falling all over themselves with varying statements about stories and stories about the same event. This is what I think happened. I think people began sharing the spice and sent both parties at different times. That's possible. But we have to investigate what happened. We have to see what is the source of this tradition, of this spicy mix-up, right? Maybe it was angels influencing the writers of the story to create different narratives for different people or different communities. That's a possibility, right? The Bible is all mixed up with contradictory statements and stories, each teaching something different. This is why we can have so many different versions of Christianity, right? It seems as if though the writers were both created different aspects of the story to fit their own narratives for their own communities, right? That's kind of what it seems. And when you compare the scrolls and the stories, we see that different communities had different traditions and the tellings of different stories. That's how this began. And this guy hopefully bridges the past and the present, showing how these traditions evolve and continue to influence our understanding. So, hopefully, this is just one small aspect of showing some questionable material that we find in the Gospels.